This is We Admit by ASAP, the podcast where we share true stories from admission and enrollment professionals. I'm your host, Janice Crampton, Executive Director and CEO. Have you ever met someone and immediately wanted them to be your friend? Well, this happened to me when I met Krystal Clark, when she presented as a member of the ASAP Leadership for Enrollment and Admission Professionals program. We call it LEAP. Our 2023-2024 cohort was mesmerized by her charismatic nature and her mincing no-word style as she highlighted the results of each of our Clifton Strengths identified skills and attributes. I'm honored to have Krystal join me today on the We Admit podcast because not only do I hope to learn from her and grow from her and through her, but I also think we're going to have a heck of a lot of fun. So join me today on this episode of We Admit. You know, Krystal, you and I really have only spent, an hour and a half together. And I immediately was drawn to your energy and your charisma and really your message. And I guess I'd love to just start with, have you been like this all your life or or did you grow into this?
You may have to ask some other people about the younger years. However, I believe so from what other people will tell me, and I am my mother's daughter through and through. And so, if you meet my mother, it would make sense for you to understand how I am, who I am in the world. She has incredibly warm energy. She speaks to everyone. You will say good morning to her. She is super inviting, wants to make sure everyone is fed and welcomed and included. She makes treat bags for everyone at the holidays. She was the perfect room mom. And so she has that thing about her, but she's also real tough, like super tough. She's a single parent, raised her two kids, and she's a strong woman. And she's a mama bear. So if you mess with us, you got something on your hands, you know what I mean? But as long as you are on her good side, you are in such a beautiful, warm, loving, non-judgmental place. She just always feels like there's enough sunshine for everyone. She was everyone's mom in school. You know, she was that mom. And they were more happy to see her than me. So 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 that I think that's where I come from. And so I think that's what you experience when you meet me is a lot of her.
Yeah. And in the spirit of also that element and aspect of like right side, wrong side of a person, here's the other thing that I've grown to recognize as someone who's been referred to as a mama bear is that my mother used to say, if I didn't love you, I'd let you grow up and be right. That idea notion of I care deeply for you. And because of that,
Absolutely.
I hold you to a particular standard or expectation,
Absolutely.
right?
Mhm.
Right?
Absolutely. And so a couple of years ago, we used to run TEDx through my office. And there was a speaker, a wonderful woman. And she said, Crystal, you are a warm demander. And I was like, what is that? She's like, I know that you care about me. I know that you love me. I know that you want me to win. But she was like, you let me know exactly what I need to be doing, what I'm doing incorrectly. But she's like, the foundation is there that I know that you love me, right? And I know that you are cheering for me all the way. But like, here's the feedback that you need to hear right now to really help you show up well on stage. And I really took that in and believe that that really does characterize a lot of my style of how I live my life, of how I lead, of how I supervise, just, everything about me.
Yeah. Do you find that that's an element and aspect, let's say, in various interviewing situations with employees that you almost need to manage expectation because there are employee or relationships where someone may not be able to respond in a good way or in a productive way because of that.
No, absolutely. And for the most part, I would say that I'm able to discern if that environment will be good for them. And I'm also really great at saying, here's why I'm thinking the way that I'm thinking. Here's why I'm responding the way that I'm responding. And I would think that anyone that's worked for me would say that they know that I'm in their corner. Um, I am an advocate for them. They know that if anyone does anything wrong to my team, it's a problem. It is a problem, because I don't deal well with that. So I think for me, it's about in the interview process, I do think through, I try to get a sense of their personality. I try to get a sense of their sense of humor. And I also am pretty articulate about this is kind of how I generally supervise. I totally believe in individualization, but this is generally how I am as a human. Tell me about that. Like, and how do you respond to that? And even if they're saying all the right things, I can often tell about the things that are not being said, whether or not it's actually going to work.
Mhm, mhm. And I also think from what you've shared too, and again, for many of the people that, listen to this podcast and long for it, which has been, really an eye opener. Beth and I were just talking a little bit ago about the fact that this podcast with you is the launch of our season.
Oh,
And as
fantastic.
yeah, so you're introing the season. We could not think of a better person. And in all sincerity, we could not think of a better person. But where I'm going with all of this is that many of the listeners are individuals who are wondering, who are pondering, who are struggling with their, let's call it managerial style or leadership style. And I think that what I'm also hearing you say and have heard you also talk about is that there needs to be an identification of one's own skill sets and one's own strengths and weaknesses before you even think about, what's that, when you're on a plane, breathe yourself before you help a
Your
child, like,
oxygen mask,
right?
yeah,
And
make sure it's on
right,
first.
right.
Yes,
And so, like,
yes.
what are your thoughts? Am I kind of thinking in the right way, or, course correct me here?
And I think you're on the right path. That self-awareness piece has to be number 1. And it really has to be about you really understanding you. I think a lot of us grow up modeling other people's leadership style, and you model other people's style of supervision. And I totally get that because you don't know. You don't know yourself, you don't know what's right and wrong. No one really teaches you how to be a great supervisor when you're in school or anything. You are really learning trial by fire. That is on the job training every single day. And so I think that you have to start there with not only developing an awareness of who you are, but coming to a sense of acceptance of who you are, right? And developing a sense of confidence around who you are. I think all of that is very important and real because I think a lot of us in society today, we do feel like we need to be somebody else to be successful. We feel like we need to be somebody else to be chosen, right? And instead of saying like, no, great for them. I'm glad that they are that way, but this is really how I show up as a supervisor. And I'm going to be very sort of clear about that and then work with people as I need to have that push and pull that's in any relationship, you know? Every relationship requires compromise and reciprocity. So that happens in your work relationships as well. But it's really important to always know what it's like to sit on the other side of you. It's important to know that and then decide what you want to do with that information. And some of us will say, it is what it is. And some of us will say, wow, I don't think I realized that. Let me do what I need to do to actually be the person and show up as the person that I want to in the workplace.
Have you always known what you or who you were and what you wanted to show up as?
I think I've always had a sense of clarity. Um, and I think I realized very early on that I'm uh I'm not the best at changing because I think I was who I was and like I was never great in theater classes. I was never great at acting. When I took one theater class in college and I tried to act a couple of times and I was abysmal at it. And my mom was like, because all you want to do is be yourself. And I was like, perhaps that is the truth. I've never been able to do that well because I never really saw the point of it in my existence.
So, in essence, if you are or were to be on the stage, it would be a one-woman act.
And it would be me. And I would just be the story of Krystal. And I think that's what, when I'm public speaking, whether I'm giving keynotes or facilitating, the workshop that you were in with me, it is really Krystal. And, I think sometimes I had a friend say to me, she was like, you got to be a little bit more corporate. And I said, really? Because that's not going to work for me. And I will tell you that I've been in some very corporate, buttoned up places, and they need to be shaken up.
Oh, yeah.
so,
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
and many of them enjoy it that there's a different sort of energy there. And it's not your typical HR button up. So, once I get going, there is no facade. It's just all Krystal.
Well, it's
Yeah.
not only that, I've again in this bit of a moment, right? It's not only clear to me. Here's the pun. It's crystal clear to me.
It's
Um, you're probably like, "Oh Lord." But no,
no,
it's
it's
this
not.
idea notion of there's freedom in this authenticity, right? It's just like I'm not putting on, as you said, the facade. And you're comfortable
Yes.
with maybe some people. I oftentimes use the phrase a particular flavor of ice cream. Like, I'm not for everybody. But when you find
No.
right? And so when you find comfort, right? When you find comfort in like, so
I will say that there's freedom in that, and one of the issues that I think we're dealing with a lot is people's well-being in the workplace. There is, my well-being and me being my full self are very intertwined. And so I was on a panel the other day, and I told them, I said, you have to choose yourself to save yourself. So it is so much more important for me to be Krystal as opposed to living in some sort of a mask and that weighing on my mental health and my well-being and weighing on the belief that I have in myself that I'm not enough or I don't belong here. I have to act like somebody else. I have to fully digest and own and claim and use that I am enough just as I am. I deserve to be here. I've done the work to be here just as Krystal. And I think, as a woman, that can be difficult sometimes. As a Black woman, that can be difficult sometimes in very predominantly white spaces. As a woman who's often been one of the youngest in the room, that can be difficult. But you have to say to yourself, you are telling a very unique story. You are living a very unique story. You are leading a very unique story, and you're here for a reason. And so, this is what I'm going to do. I have to do it as me. I
yeah,
have to.
you
I
have
have
to.
to choose Krystal. I
Yeah.
have to.
And I think that by you doing that, it gives others permission to
Oh,
be
yeah.
themselves.
It's a
And again,
it's an
it's
invitation.
an invitation. As we look back on the many markers of success, of which, there's the markers of success that are indicated through one's bio, right? One's LinkedIn profile, one's resume, right? And we know there's many more, but again, as I was looking more into, let's call it the imprint background, I was once again very I was struck by as well as impressed by, but I was struck by, as you noted just a moment ago, that you have been in situations that someone might say, "Wow, I'm surprised." I think back on, being the first Black president of the Junior League of Nashville. I bet you stirred up a couple of things because right? I mean, there's a couple of again, like,
Yeah.
this does not
Yeah.
seem as someone who's been in the junior league and then suddenly felt because again, I was a working mom that people were going, "Wait, hold it."
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We work from the home, and there's no judgment here. I'm just
Oh, no.
stating the profile. But that experience, and then again, working in so many philanthropic ways with the Children's Hospital, and you mentioned the theater, and yet you were the board of directors of the Belcourt Theater. So needless to say, you're a lover of, but
Am.
yeah. But did you find
Yes.
that you had to necessarily not push yourself into those situations, but were those situations afforded to you because you reached out and said, "I'm interested," or were people reaching out to you? I mean, tell me a little bit about how you, let's call it, landed in these places.
I think it was a little bit of a mixture, and I will always give credit to people along the way who looked like me and didn't look like me, who said, "You should do this," and were supportive in that. I never thought I would be Junior League of National president. I never thought that. That was 96 years it took to get a black president. 96 years.
96 years. Yeah.
96
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
However, I showed up as my overly enthusiastic, overly engaged volunteer self. I showed up as someone who always had ideas, who always raised her hand. I did more community projects than anybody else, and I would go to all the meetings and get really into the conversations. And I'm pretty friendly, right? So I would meet people and then ask people out to lunch. But it wasn't in an effort to get to presidency. I just was trying to be a good member of the organization and to, get my money's worth out of this membership
That's
that I
right.
was
That's
paying
right.
for. But along the way, there are people who see you, right? And I remember I had the current president at the time that I sort of joined said, "I want to take you out to lunch." And she looked at me and she said, "Who are you?" She's like, "You came out of nowhere and you're everywhere." And she was like, "So what do you want to do?" And she helped me to start to plot my path. And I need that. You need people like that in your life. And to be open to that sort of assistance, I think is so important. Later on, as I'm making my way through leadership ranks and really doing things in the organization that I actually care about, I wasn't just jumping on random committees. I was doing the things that I was very passionate about in that organization. And I was saying no to things that I wasn't passionate about within that organization. I became eligible for president. And I had another friend call me and she was like, "You're going to apply for this, right?" And I said, "Well," and I even said it to myself. I said, "Well, I feel like I'm a little young," right? Because at the time, I was one of the youngest as well that ever did it. And I said, "I also work a full time job," right? And a lot of our presidents were not working. And I said, "I don't have that privilege. It's just me paying these bills," right? And she was like, "No, you've got to do it." And I applied and, was afforded the honor of that position. And it was one of the greatest privileges of my existence, honestly, to be a part of that organization and to start to set a precedent. Since then, we've had multiple non white presidents. And the diversity and the inclusion within our organization has grown tremendously. It's beautiful to now go back as a sustainer and see, I'm like, gosh, look at all these people. These folks weren't here before. And so but it's been a mixture of I'm going after it and people saying, "Hey, you seem like you like to get stuff done and people like you. So can you do this too?" And so I think you need both in the world, honestly. And I think you need to be a person who's willing to say yes to some things.
Mhm, mhm. What do you say no to?
A lot these days,
Yeah,
Jan.
yeah, yeah.
I'm a little tired in so many ways. I think I say no to anything that doesn't suit my values. Like it's not in alignment with my core. Anything that when I sit down and think about it, I'm like, oh, I could be very embarrassed by this, or it honestly, it could embarrass my family. And I have like my family is a huge part of my value system. Anything that I think is not inclusive or not trying to be inclusive, right? Um, and at this point, I am so aware of my capacity that I embrace the pause in life, pause, and I do take a deep breath. I would answer emails like, yes, 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 when I was younger. And now I'm like, I'll let them know. Let me sleep on it. Let me take a night. Let me look at the calendar. Um, because I just don't want to get caught up in something for no reason. Um, and I don't always have to be the person at the table. There could be somebody else who'd be much better. And I know a lot of amazing people in this town that I'm like, have you asked her? Have you asked him? Maybe you should ask her. It doesn't have to be me. And I think that comes with a set of maturity and also sort of moving beyond that sense of scarcity mindset where we think there's room, only room for one, right? And I have to be the one. And I'm really beyond that right now.
It's funny, again, to our listeners, you and I were having a conversation right before we hit the record button about speed and about pace, because again, I completely relate to what you're saying with regard to pace about things. And when you have so much going on and when you have the capacity to manage a lot, or multiple projects at the same time. What's that phrase? There's no such thing as being able to really multitask. But again, we try. But where I'm going with this is the idea notion of I can tell when I'm out of balance. I
Oh
can
gosh.
tell. And that realization has been kind of new to me, right? And within sort of this past year of knowing that when I am out of balance, not only am I making clerical errors, but I'm also physically and mentally just not my best self. And to give myself the permission to say, whoa, stop, you know, drink more water, go out for a walk.
Right. Go work out. I've started playing golf recently,
You
right? And
have? Oh
I
my
have,
gosh.
and I get it. I get it. We always sort of make fun of men who are like out playing golf for hours, but I'm like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. I get You are outside, you are in nature, you're doing this challenging thing that's taking your brain to a new place. I'm not trying to be, on the LPGA, so who cares if I'm bad at it? It has been such a great mental and physical gift, to my existence to try to go out there and hit this little white ball in the air.
So my husband prior to marriage was a big time golfer, and he would,
Okay.
spout this, single digit handicap and so on and so on.
Ooh.
And yeah, ooh baby baby. And yet he is very quick to say that marrying me ruined his game. And at first I was like, "Oh my gosh." But I do know that one day, that one moment when I think I ruined it because he was getting ready to go golfing and I said, "What time will you be home?" And he goes, "Oh, no. No, 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 no." Because he's like, you right? You don't rush through golf. You don't have a time span. You
Right.
take
You
as
let it
long as
flow.
you need, right? Let it flow. And so meanwhile, I'm like, "Well, no. I mean, tick tock. Like we've got things to do. We've got things to do." So, well, good for you for finding that outlet. Mine has been discovering yoga and really enjoying
Ooh,
it.
I love that. Yeah.
And again, permission to not see it as, I can't do a downward dog without a pain in my, hamstring or whatever. But also crochet. And my joke about the crochet,
Ooh.
I know, but here, doesn't that sound very Nana like? Which I'm a little, but the crochet challenge is I only know how to do one stitch. And so we have more like strips in the house, or like
Lots of scarves, very
partial.
thin scarves.
Exactly, exactly. So again, my wonderful husband's like, "So do you make other anything else other than, throws?" So yeah. So again, finding something that you love, sticking with it and being willing to maybe try some new things. That's a good one. That's a really good one. We oftentimes again think about the journeys that we've been on. Would you mind just again, we can read the imprint, but can you describe your professional journey and from the perspective of what brought you to one thing to the next,
Yeah. So I got started in student affairs because I was obsessed with college. I am a first generation college student. And so when I went to William and Mary, which was only an hour away from my house, I literally felt like I was in a whole different world and it became my heaven. Like I just loved it. And so I mean I still love it. I still think about how beautiful the campus is and all the people that I met and the opportunities. It just set me up really well in life. It was such a great decision for me. And I'm so thankful that my family was supportive of me going to William and Mary in so many ways. And so there were all these lovely people on campus who were helping this first generation college student navigate the chaos of college. And I decided I wanted to be one of those people. And I didn't know that was a profession. I thought they were just like really nice second grade teachers who decided to work at a college all of a sudden.
Oh,
So,
that's so funny.
uh, and so then I just reached out to them and said, "Hey, how do I do what you do?" And they were more than happy to invest in me in that way. And went to graduate school, which was fantastic. Went to the University of Maryland. Now you have to understand, I my mother has never been on a plane. And so anything within Virginia is very manageable for her, but anything outside of Virginia feels like a lot. And I was like, "Mom, the school is only 3 hours away. Like, that's it. That's it." She's like, "But it's over state lines." And I was like, "I don't care. I'm going."
Yeah.
But in that moment, because at that point, I had only been on a plane maybe once. My world had been very small. So I had to say to myself, how am I going to get to Maryland for my interviews? So I was like, I'm going to get on the train. My mom's like, "You're going to get on the train?" I was like, "Yes, I'm going to get on the train." So I bought my Amtrak ticket. My roommate dropped me off the train station. I went on the train. And then when I got to Maryland, they have a metro in Maryland. Well, this Virginia girl had never been on a metro before. So I was shaking in my boots. Well, my buddy at Maryland said, "It's all colors." Just follow the colors, right?
Only go on things that have
Just
blue, right?
Right,
Yeah.
you're
Right.
gonna be on the green line, just stay on the green line, and that's how I got to graduate school for my initial interview and for my assistantship interview, which paid for me to go to school, right? But I think part of that lesson is for anyone that's listening, you've gotta do some stuff that's outside of your comfort zone, and you gotta do some things that take you beyond sort of the bubble that you grew up in, right? Like, I could have stayed in Virginia my whole life and been an hour away from my mom, and that would have been okay. I'm not judging that, but I would have missed out on a whole lot of Krystal and a whole lot of life if I had said, "Oh, I have no way to get to Maryland because I didn't have a car." Like I didn't have enough money for plane tickets, but the train was very affordable back then. So
That's right. That's
that's what I
exactly right.
did.
Yeah.
So I went to graduate school and took a very non-traditional job to pay for graduate school. I lived in a fraternity house for 2 years. I lived with 34 students each year, 34 men of a fraternity. My address was number 2 fraternity row. Now, you want to talk about doing something unconventional? Certainly that was unconventional. It was me and 34 of them. And I was not even a sorority woman at the time, right? But I took on that role because it was a challenge. Financially, it was incredible. And I knew that within that house, I was going to learn a whole lot about the college student and how to apply my work to being with college students. And I also knew that I grew up with a brother. I was pretty tough. And so I could do that.
You could
And
have
so I went
35 of them,
I oh my gosh.
right?
And there was 100 people in the chapter, 34 lived in the house. And so we just never knew how many were going to be in a house at a time. And that assistantship taught me quite a bit, but I think it taught me a lot about what I can handle, and how I can relate to all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds, and how a lot of college students just need someone to talk to who's going to like really listen to them. And that the things that I love, right? Because I fell in love with, equity, diversity, and inclusion work. I fell in love with leadership work. I could do those things within that house all day long, right? And I could do those things in fraternity story life all day long. I got really into women's leadership development, where I got to do a bunch of stuff with our sororities on campus. So I took on that job, and everyone was like, "You are crazy. Like, how can," my brother was like, "You're going to live where?" But it was one of the best things I've ever done. I'm still in contact with so many of those young men, as they've grown into full adults with families and wonderful careers. And it's a beautiful thing to sort of, have that sort of connection with them, that space and time. Well, I thought I was going to be a diversity professional. That's what I was going to do. That's who my mentor had been in undergrad. But then I started thinking about what are the needs, right? And I started thinking about being someone who was looking for gaps and how I could fill those gaps. And in fraternity and sorority life as a whole, there was a huge gap when it came to diversity work. There was a huge gap when it came to leadership work. There was a huge gap of unaffiliated people who were working with fraternity and sorority life students and really helping to be champions of that experience, right? And I thought to myself, why am I going to go where people already are? I want to do this work where it's needed. And so I decided to swing my career search to exclusively fraternity and sorority life and go and do all these things that I love and care about with a community that desperately needed and still needs a lot of that work. That led me to Duke for 4 years, working with the fraternity and sorority community there, which was lovely. And then, your life is sort of run by other people when it comes to time up until a certain point. You know, this is how long you stay in high school. My mom was my alarm clock. This is how long you stay in college. But then all of a sudden you have your first job and you become the timekeeper. And that no one had ever sort of made that apparent to me that I was going to be the one to decide it unless I was fired, how long I stayed at my first job. I stayed there for 4 years and I was like, well, because, I'm working at Duke. Like, that's a big deal. Like, who leaves Duke? I've made it. Do you know what I mean? And I remember going out with a colleague for lunch and letting him know that I was feeling some dissatisfaction, but I didn't really know what to do about it because why would I ever leave here? I can't leave. That would be like, why would I leave? And he was very clear in saying to me, he was like, I am so happy that you are so dedicated and so loyal to Duke. But he was like, your employer does not have to have the same dedication and loyalty to you. At any time, Duke can say, thank you for your service. Please move on. Right. And you have to own that you have the same agency. And you can't sit around, you can't sit around thinking that you'll never be able to do any better because there could be better out there for you, right? And so your quest is to find that. And I needed that conversation to invite me to say, okay, I'm leaving.
Have you ever wondered how you stack up? I mean, truly stack up between where you are in your career, your salary, your office size, maybe even how you stack up as a school in the context of other schools that are like yours? Well, ASAP has a way to solve that problem. It's through our Pathways Benchmarking Salary and Survey tool. We hope that you've participated because it certainly is part of your membership. But if you haven't finished this survey, there's still time. So make sure to hunt out that email that we sent to you. Or if you didn't get that email, reach out to us at info@asap.org and we'll make sure that you have the tools in order for you to know your pathway, know your journey, and be part of an overall research tool that is by and for admission and enrollment professionals. There's something that you just said that I know will resonate with a number of people. I oftentimes hear people in this profession who perhaps came to where they are at a particular school because their children went there or they have a connection, or for many day schools, it's because, they live in that general zip code. And then there becomes this, again, as you so beautifully stated it or described it, there's this unsettledness, right? I describe it as the bell rings. All of a sudden, the bell rings, and you go, I'm ready. I'm ready for something else, and I don't know what it is. And so often there is, again, likening to something that you just said, there's this almost, am I a traitor, right? Am I, am I, am I showing a misalignment or a misallegiance to, and that I owe it to this school to stay here? What would people say? And I think what you've just described here is really important for us to pause on. That it's not that, again, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not that your school doesn't appreciate you. It's not that your school doesn't value you, but for us to hold dear to something when in fact they potentially aren't going to be as endearing to you is a misstep. Did I capture that properly?
No, you capture that
Okay.
perfectly.
Yeah.
And I think you can also, because I see this a lot in my work now in human resources, there's almost a resentment that starts to arise.
Yes. Oh gosh, absolutely.
And then it's hard to bring your best self to the workplace because no matter how hard you try, that feeling starts to show up in your actions. It starts to show up in your
Totally.
conversations and how you're working with your stakeholders or your customers, however you define that term, how you work with your colleagues. It all starts to come out. And that's not a great day at work when that starts to come
That
out.
is not a great day at work. And there's another phrase that I recently heard of, that I think, Adam Grant has used and his research colleagues have used, and it's called passion tax. Have you heard of this?
Okay, I have not, but tell
Okay,
me.
you ready?
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
know that I'm interviewing you, but here goes. So, what strikes me about this phrase, and again, I'm not using the definition verbatim, but the idea behind it is so often in our jobs and in our work, we do more, and in schools, we use that phrase and everything else that the head of school asks you to do, right? And many an admission and enrollment practitioner will say, well, I have my job, but I also do bus duty and substitute teach, and I run the school fair, and I do this, and I also do, bookkeeping, and and they wear many hats. And everyone kind of says, oh, yes, 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 but you can do it. And the idea behind this passion tax is that you begin to develop a level of resentment because you are not being compensated appropriately for the work that you're doing, and in fact, your passion becomes a tax that is, in fact, withdrawing from you and your ability to be your best self.
Absolutely. We use other duties as assigned. That's what we use in higher ed. That's what at the bottom of every resume is, and other duties as assigned. And then you start to realize what those other duties are, and you go, "Wow." Oh, and it's this thing about, I think about myself as a 24-year-old student affairs professional who had no issues with those other duties. I was like, "Oh yes, volunteer for the bonfire. Absolutely. Yeah, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it." And I remember coming to Vanderbilt and going, "No, thank you. I I am at a different place in my life right now. I totally understand more of my worth and my value. I get that by doing all this extra, I'm just becoming more tired. And I can't actually afford to be more tired. Like if you really want full Krystal, you've got to allow me to hold on to the energy and allow me to really live out that passion in a healthy way. Um, but I think you're right. I think we start to take advantage of people.
We start to take advantage of people. And I think that in the spirit of taking advantage of people, it's always sort of masked with this idea of we're a community and we foster a feeling of family and we all need to do other things. And there just becomes a point, right? And I think it begins to detract from your professional persona because you look like a crazy person running all over the place, right?
You do. I call it mission based gaslighting.
Oh,
I think,
good one.
when you're in education, you are contributing to this, like, a very purposeful, important thing in the world, right? You are helping to educate America's youth, right? And all of our every institution has these, lovely glowing mission statements. And so that almost it gets thrown in your face if you start saying no. What do you mean you'll say no, or you want to get paid more for this, but this is who we are. So it's sort of, and then you feel like, oh my gosh, I must be a terrible educator because I'm not falling in line with this. But I think there's a lot of mission based gaslighting in higher ed because we don't want to pay people their worth. We don't want to hire more people to do the job, right? So let's keep hitting you with this because you can't say no to this, right?
That's right. Well, and again, I think that age and stage thing comes into play too, because, I am 60 and I would not be the dorm mom in a fraternity, right? We'd have a different talk about lights out. It'd be a different experience. So when you moved on to Vanderbilt and again, then found yourself in that new office that was created, and then serving as the director, that new initiative was that, I mean, again, How did that happen at Vanderbilt? Because did you help create that department? Because I kind of feel like of
Yes.
course you did. Of course. I mean, what a silly
So,
question. Of course, Krystal
no.
created the department.
So there was 2 years before that where I took on another role in fraternity and sorority life that was a promotion. And I got to around a year and a half in and was like, no, thank you. I cannot do this anymore. So I did something that I think is really important. I took my, now that I think about it, I took my supervisor's supervisor out to lunch and I expressed to him how I was feeling. And I wasn't feeling great. And it wasn't about her at all. It was about the work, right? It was about, and so I thought that me and Vanderbilt were done. But we had a reorganization going on and we had all these committees. And so you could either volunteer to be on a committee or be voluntold to be on a committee.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And I volunteered to be on the leadership development committee. In doing so, we wrote the proposal that ended up becoming the office that I ran for 7 years. So by me saying yes to that committee and showing that I had a passion there, but also experience and getting in that room and working with people and developing those frameworks and that structure and thinking about leadership development on a larger level because of my education from Maryland, that was perfect. That had been my concentration at Maryland. I knew all the people in the field who had written all the books. And so when my dean of students finally said, we're going to create the office, I was one of the people in line to become the inaugural director of that office. And I was able to get that job. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how that happened. So did that for 7 years and then said, it's time for a change. And then that little thing called the pandemic came. So as I'm trying to figure out exit strategies, I think, oh, this may not be the best time to look for a job or to leave a job is during a pandemic. Like, how about you just, because I honestly thought, because a lot of institutions were furloughing their staff. Because once the students left, they were like, well, if we furlough you, we can save that money. I work in a very well-resourced place, and that is a privilege. And so they kept us on. However, they offered an early out program. And so the people who were in my role, they were near retirement. So they were like, listen, I'm just going to take the balloon and leave because they're like, we don't know what's happening in the world. However, the school decided to rehire those positions. Now, here's what's important to think about because I think that every job is preparing you. And I think if you have a vision for yourself, you start doing the work of the next job that you want.
Okay. Pause.
So
Pause. So you always are right. So you're creating the opportunity. Wait, you need to say that again. You're preparing yourself for the next job while you're in the present
absolutely,
job.
every job that you're in is preparing you, even jobs that you don't like.
That's right.
And so you have to zone in on what are you learning and what do you need to learn to get to where you want to go. I had decided that I wanted to no longer work with students. I wanted to work with staff members. That's where I wanted to do learning and development. So I said to myself, okay, here I am in this office, and we have a lot of staff members on campus who need leadership programming. So I'm going to start developing staff based programming to invite staff members to. So that's what I started doing. And the programs became very popular on campus, very popular. From all departments, people would come. People started requesting the programs. Great. So then I said, well, I need to figure out if I want to be this person, I need to figure out what that person does. So I had an informational interview with the person whose job I ended up taking. So I met with her, followed her around for a day, figured out what she did, learned her credentials. And then I connected with her team members and started going to like little sort of affinity groups with them where we shared facilitation tips and leadership resources. So then I joined a committee that was all about professional development on campus and met a ton of people. And then I joined an HR committee. So all this is happening prior to pandemic, but I'm planning to get all this in my toolbox so that I can go apply for a job away from Vanderbilt.
Oh, because
Right?
you hadn't
Because
opened up your
I
own company yet, had you?
I hadn't opened up my own company, and also the women who were in these roles have been in these roles for a long time, and those jobs don't become open very often. However, here comes a pandemic. So once they leave, I get a call from a friend that I made in HR because I had been making connections. And she said, Crystal, the jobs are going to be posted on Monday. Get your stuff together over the weekend. You have to apply. And I had already made an impression on the hiring manager. And so I interviewed and got the job.
Wow, that's a phenomenal opportunity, right?
Right. You know, and I got to stay in Nashville. And it's been since September 2020 I started this role. And so it's been, 3 years. And it's been the best thing for me at this point in my life. Absolutely.
What are you proudest of in the work that you've done? There's gotta be a standout, and I know there's
What am I
many, and
proudest of?
yeah, you can only have
That
one choice.
question. Oh,
Or or
stop
le
it.
or maybe let me ask you this, have you ever
Well,
thought you go ahead.
I mean, I would think, and you brought this up, I starting my business, I think is the proudest of myself I've ever been. Because I started August 2020. um, and it was during a time where everyone was asking for virtual experiences. And I had been doing that work and just sort of doing things for connections that I had and whatnot. But to sit down and really plan it out and think about it and think about the funding of it and set up my little home studio and do, you know what I mean? And really put myself out there. I don't come from a legacy of entrepreneurship, right? And to do that and to work the way that I do, and to have people reaching out to me, I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of it. It was always on my list of things that I think I wanted to do. And so, I think for a lot of us, the pandemic there's a lot of perspective there. And it was like, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it, Crystal? Because you don't know what's happening tomorrow. And so I just was like, okay, I'm going to file the paper. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And it's been going ever since. And it's been a beautiful thing.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. One listening to this might imagine that you've never had, as the author Wendy Mogul might say, blessings of a skinned knee. I mean, Crystal, have you ever faltered or failed? Is there a moment where you
Oh,
again think about this,
yeah.
where you think about this and you go, "Woof, that was most unfortunate." And given that, what did you learn from it?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely failed and had some skin knees. I think the other thing to understand is that I haven't always been, the most popular kid on the block either, right? So I've been through a lot. And I was told very early on that everyone wouldn't like me. So I think I just sort of inhaled that very early and held on to that. But yeah, there have been times when I've failed. And here's the thing, I make mistakes all the time. I think I have become so comfortable in admitting that
That's right. There you go.
and apologizing if I need to and course correcting. It doesn't even feel like effort anymore. It's, woo, I did that. That's on me. I deeply apologize. Let's make this right. And I'm going to do what I need to do to make amends. And that has been a very, I don't know, it's just kind of a very freeing thing to be able to not have to hold on to those mistakes or to stew over them a great deal. I give voice to things that I'm shameful about. I've learned that, I think, from Brene Brown, of giving that voice and not holding on to that, because no one's a unicorn. We've all messed up. And giving voice to that is so, it just lightens you up and it invites other people in to also share. Listen, I did the same thing. Like, let me help you work through this. So yeah, I there's tons of skin knees.
But I think what you've also said here in the spirit of the skin knee analogy is that there is this acknowledgement and acceptance that you've made these errors or these fumbles or these trips and falls, but you get back up, right?
You
Like
have
the
to, and
gospel, we fall down
yeah,
and we get back up.
you get back up, right? And everyone's not going to say yes to you all the time. I wasn't accepted to every grad school. Do you know what I mean? And I didn't get everything the first time around, but if it meant something to me, I tried again. Um, and that's just the way it is, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So, Crystal, as we think about our time together today, I'd love to just hear in the sort of the CVG, as they say, what are your current challenges, your victories, and your gratitudes?
Oh gosh, that's a deep question.
We're pretty deep here at ASAP. We're pretty deep.
Uh, Listen, my biggest challenge and the one that I go to work to address every single day is that I just don't think work has to be a horrible place for people. Um, I don't think it has to be that hard. I don't think it has to be something that beats you down. And so I'm trying to do, along with my incredible team of humans that I get to work with every day, constantly trying to figure out how do we create things, facilitate conversations to just try to make our workplace a better place for people. That's a challenge that I think about quite often. So that's biggest challenge right now. And also, I need to stop shopping so much. But I
Ah, I
think
love it. I love it. I love it.
that's
Yeah.
the personal challenge. But that's my big thing is this workplace thing. I don't know. We're working through it. And I think we always will be. But I think progress is important. So
But don't you also think in the workplace thing, and the challenges that are coming out, I think far more than we've allowed them to come out, right? It's not that they weren't
which
there,
is
but right?
Oh, it's wonderful, right? I think the pandemic was a highlighter, right? It was a flashlight, as people would say. And I think that's wonderful because I do think employees have found more agency and they're speaking up more and saying more. And for someone like me, I love that, right? But for a lot of people, they're like, oh,
Well,
like,
and that gets
why?
back to the, let's call it, training, right? That we have to equip not only the employees but the employers with, so what do
Absolutely.
we do with all this? Because again, it's out and people,
It's out.
haven't been equipped. They haven't been equipped. Or they're I haven't been equipped. They haven't been taught how to be, right? And what to do.
Exactly.
Um,
Absolutely.
you know, but I loved when you said about the shopping thing because I also noted that again, you love your podcasts and you love your binge watching. Okay, so what are you binge watching now, Crystal?
What do I binge? I am gonna start The Crown this evening. The last season, part one, is out. I think today.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
it came
it's
out
out
a couple
today.
of days ago.
Oh,
So
okay,
I
okay.
will I will get back into that again. And then each year I have an annual rewatch of Mad Men.
Oh my
So I'm
gosh,
in the
you're my
middle of
sister from
that.
another mother. I
I
I love
just think
that.
it's the perfect show. Yes,
Yes,
I watch
yes.
it once a year. So I'm there with that right now too.
So are you do you get dare I use this word? Are you triggered in Mad Men by all of the HR blunders that are committed? Right?
It makes me giggle, right? It's like this is a very different time, It's definitely not a great workplace. How about that?
When you're like, "Don Draper, you can't do that.
Right?
You
I
can't
mean,
do that."
but it's Don Draper. I let him get away with a lot,
Hey,
you know what I
exactly,
mean? So
exactly. Exactly, exactly. Well, Crystal, it has been an honor and a privilege to spend time with you today. And as I think about, again, what we do on this podcast on the regular, this is our third year of doing this. We also like to collect what the people or the get psych songs of those that we meet with. So, and then Beth puts together a playlist at the end of the year.
oh gosh.
So,
This is hard.
Crystal, you wake up in the morning or you hop in the car or you get ready to go to bar three or your golf match and you put on the AirPods and a song comes on. What's your Get Psych song, Crystal?
I hate this question
You hate this question?
because I am obsessed with music.
Yeah.
Obsessed.
So are you
But
saying
I
you
will
don't
say that
have one?
right now, no, I have many. But
Oh,
I will
okay.
say that right. So I took on a project to understand the love of Taylor Swift. Because I was not a Swiftie. I was not a Swiftie. And so I didn't get it. And so when the tour came out, I was like, what? Because I'm a Beyonce girl. Not that they go against each other because they don't, but I was more focused on Beyonce's tour, not on Taylor's. But I took on this desire to figure it out. And so right now, I am listening to her 1989 album. And that has been getting me going in the morning. So anything you want to take from that album is fantastic. And I will say, unfortunately, one of the songs that I love that is so annoying to most people is Shake It Off, because I want you to listen to the lyrics of what she's saying, about shaking it off and how she never misses a beat. She's lightning on her feet, and that's not what people see, right? Because she's judged a lot, but she wrote all that music, and it's incredible. So you can put Shake It Off on the list. Yeah. So there you go.
There you go. Love it, love it. And that song, We Will Never, Ever, Ever Get Back Together. I just want to tell you that I want to say we will always, always, always get back together, because Krystal Clark,
Fantastic.
you rock. You
Thank
rock.
you. You did too.
Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of We Admit. To learn more about the Association of Independent School Admission Professionals and how you can take advantage of membership benefits, visit asap.org. That's AISAP.org.